Rain pounded the empty streets of Newport, Rhode Island, the kind of storm that made even the bravest hurry home. But one small figure had nowhere to go. A 10-year-old girl, Talia Green, staggered down the sidewalk barefoot, clutching a threadbare teddy bear. She was shivering when a man twice her size stepped out of the shadows. His beard dripped with rain, his heavy boots splashing mud across her face as he shoved her to the ground. "You're nothing but a stray," he sneered. "Worth more sold than saved." The girl didn't cry out. She just held her teddy closer, like a shield against the cruelty of the world. But before the man could strike again, headlights swept across the street. A sleek black car rolled up the hill toward the largest estate in town. Behind those gates lived a man of power and wealth, Nathaniel Cross. And tonight their lives were about to collide in a way neither expected. If you had seen this happen, would you have stepped in or walked away? Tell me in the comments. The man's shadow vanished into the storm, but Talia's eyes locked on the glowing mansion above. From the harbor below, Nathaniel's estate looked more like a fortress than a home. Walls of stone, gates of iron, lights shining over manicured lawns. For most, it was untouchable. For Talia, it was the only place left to run. She dragged herself through the rain, slipping between the iron bars of the gate. Her small body scraped against the metal, but she didn't stop. She crawled through hedges, past rose bushes, bent under the downpour, until she stood in the wide driveway. That was when the black car pulled in. Its tires hissed against the wet pavement, headlights blinding her. She froze like a rabbit caught in the open. The door opened, and Nathaniel Cross stepped out. 48 years old, tall, coat draped over his broad shoulders. His name commanded respect in real estate circles from Boston to Miami. People said he was brilliant, unstoppable, but cold. Tonight, he just looked tired. And then he saw her. Talia stood just inside the towering entryway, dripping rain onto marble floors so polished they reflected her small frame. She clutched her teddy bear tightly, afraid that even her breath might break something. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne, nothing like the damp alleys she had run through an hour earlier. To her, the house was enormous, vaulted ceilings, a chandelier glittering with hundreds of lights, and staircases that curved upward like something out of a world she'd only seen from a distance. Nathaniel Cross watched her quietly. For years, he had moved through this mansion without noticing its beauty. Tonight, he saw it differently, through the eyes of a child who had nothing. He gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit. You need to warm up." Talia hesitated. Her muddy feet had already left faint prints across the marble, and her instinct told her to stay standing, ready to be pushed out at any moment. "Go on," he repeated, his voice calmer this time. She moved slowly, settling onto the edge of the chair. Her thin dress clung to her skin, her shoulders shaking from the storm. If you were in Nathaniel's shoes, would you have let her stay or called someone to take her away? Share your thoughts in the comments. From the hallway, sharp footsteps echoed closer. A woman in a dark suit appeared carrying a tablet. Margaret, Nathaniel's longtime house manager, froze when she saw the child sitting in the chair. "Mr. Cross, there's a child in the house," she said firmly. Nathaniel didn't look away from Talia. "I can see that." "She shouldn't be here," Margaret pressed. "The estate isn't a shelter." Talia shrank under the woman's gaze, gripping her teddy until her knuckles whitened. Nathaniel turned his head slowly, his voice clipped. "She stays." The manager's lips tightened, but she knew better than to argue. She nodded curtly and disappeared back into the hallway.
The house had grown quiet, the only sound the low crackle of the fire in the living room. Talia sat curled in the oversized chair, damp hair clinging to her face. Nathaniel stood near the window, staring at the rain-streaked glass. Beyond the gates, the SUV's headlights glowed faintly, like watchful eyes. He wasn't sure what troubled him more, the thought of a child left alone in the storm, or the idea that someone had followed her all the way here. He turned back toward Talia. "How long have you been out there?" She hugged her teddy, hesitant. "Since yesterday," her voice was barely above a whisper. Nathaniel's chest tightened. Newport was no place for a child to wander. In this town, people noticed a misplaced yacht before they noticed a hungry kid. Be honest, would you have called the authorities by now, or done what Nathaniel did and kept her close? Tell me below. The sound of a door slamming echoed down the hallway. Margaret reappeared, her expression tense. "Mr. Cross, this is dangerous. Whoever left her outside could come back. The staff are worried." Nathaniel cut her off. "I'll handle it." Margaret looked as if she wanted to argue, but his tone left no room. She nodded stiffly and left. He walked over to Talia, crouching so they were eye level. "Listen to me. No one is going to hurt you while you're under this roof." Her small fingers dug into the teddy's warm fur. "They always come back," she whispered. Nathaniel frowned. "Who?" She shook her head quickly, refusing to answer. That was the first moment he realized this wasn't random. Someone wanted her, and badly. "What do you think? Did Talia stumble here by chance, or is there a bigger story behind why she was running?" Nathaniel leaped toward the window again, and the SUV's headlights flicked off. The watchers had vanished into the night. Nathaniel decided to settle her into one of the guest rooms upstairs. The walls were lined with books, the bed draped in white linen. Talia hesitated at the doorway, eyes wide. "It's too nice for me." He frowned. "It's just a bed." "No," she said, almost apologetically. "But it's like this. They're for kids who matter." Her words struck harder than she could have known. Nathaniel cleared his throat, forcing away the lump that rose there. "Tonight, this room is yours." He fetched a blanket and handed it to her. She pulled it around her shoulders, sinking into the bed slowly, as if it would vanish. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "What's the bear's name?" Talia glanced down. "Buttons. He's all I've got left." Nathaniel nodded. He closed the door halfway, leaving a strip of golden light spilling across the floor, a silent promise she wasn't alone anymore. "Would you have trusted her enough to give her a room, or kept her on the couch? Comment your answer." Hours later, Nathaniel sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched at his side. His phone buzzed with a new message. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Nathaniel's jaw tightened as he read the message again. No signature, no number, just a line that confirmed what Talia had tried to warn him. She wasn't safe. He stared into the darkened study, the storm outside finally beginning to fade. But inside him, another storm brewed. Questions, doubts, and a choice he had never expected to face. Upstairs, Talia slept for the first time in days, her breathing steady, her teddy tucked beneath her chin. She had no idea that her presence had just placed Nathaniel Cross in the center of a dangerous game. Because if the message was true, whoever was watching wasn't finished. They had only just begun. This is only the beginning. If you're invested in Talia's fate, make sure you subscribe to Goodness Corner right now. By subscribing, you'll never miss the next twist, and you'll always be first to see how compassion can change the course of a life.
The mansion was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that comforted. Every creak of the old beams, every groan of the storm fading outside seemed louder than usual. Talia lay curled in the massive guest bed, her teddy bear tucked beneath her chin. She should have felt safe here, but safety was a word she had learned not to trust. Her eyes kept darting to the half-open door where the golden strip of light from the hallway spilled in. Downstairs, Nathaniel paced the living room. He wasn't used to this kind of responsibility. He could close billion-dollar deals without hesitation, yet one scared little girl had left him unsettled in ways he hadn't felt in decades. He poured himself coffee, his eyes drawn to the window. The SUV was gone now, but the unease it left behind clung to the walls. Do you believe Nathaniel should have called the police already, or was he right to keep her hidden? Comment your take. Upstairs, Talia's eyes flew open when she heard voices drifting in from outside. At first, she thought it was part of a dream, but the whispers grew clearer, floating through the rain-soaked hedges outside her window. "She's in there." Her stomach dropped. She scrambled out of bed and tiptoed toward the curtains. Through a thin gap, she spotted two men standing near the garden wall. They weren't part of the staff. Their postures were tense, their faces half hidden beneath hoods. "Boss said we've got until morning. Then we take her back." Talia stumbled back from the window, her breathing quick. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching buttons the teddy so tightly it seems groaned. Her mind screamed to run, but where could she go? If you were Talia, would you have screamed for help or stayed silent to avoid being found? Share your thoughts. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Someone was approaching her room. The door eased open, and Nathaniel's tall frame filled the space. He noticed her trembling by the window and frowned. "What's wrong?" She shook her head quickly, fear written across her face. He followed her gaze to the curtains, pulled them back, and scanned the lawn. The garden lights revealed only dripping hedges and glistening stone paths. The men were gone. "Did you hear something?" he pressed. Talia swallowed hard. "They said they're coming back." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure whether to believe her words, but the unease in her tone left no doubt she had heard something real. He crouched down. "Listen to me. If anyone comes near this house, they'll go through me first." She looked into his eyes, searching for certainty. For the first time, she found a sliver of it. "Would you trust Nathaniel if you were in Talia's position, or would you still be afraid?" As he tucked her back into bed, Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. This time, the message was more direct. "Tomorrow night. Be ready." Nathaniel stayed awake until dawn, working at his desk but unable to focus. The message replayed in his mind. Whoever these people were, they wanted her badly enough to risk showing themselves near his property. Why? What could a child like Talia possibly mean to them? Upstairs, Talia's eyes flew open when she heard voices drifting in from outside. At first, she thought it was part of a dream, but the whispers grew clearer, floating through the rain-soaked hedges outside her window. "She's in there!" Her stomach dropped. She scrambled out of bed and tiptoed toward the curtains. Through a thin gap, she spotted two men standing near the garden wall. They weren't part of the staff. Their postures were tense, their faces half hidden beneath hoods. "Boss said we've got until morning. Then we take her back." Talia stumbled back from the window, her breathing quick. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching buttons the teddy so tightly it seems groaned. Her mind screamed to run, but where could she go? If you were Talia, would you have screamed for help or stayed silent to avoid being found? Share your thoughts. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Someone was approaching her room. The door eased open, and Nathaniel's tall frame filled the space. He noticed her trembling by the window and frowned. "What's wrong?" She shook her head quickly, fear written across her face. He followed her gaze to the curtains, pulled them back, and scanned the lawn. The garden lights revealed only dripping hedges and glistening stone paths. The men were gone. "Did you hear something?" he pressed. Talia swallowed hard. "They said they're coming back." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure whether to believe her words, but the unease in her tone left no doubt she had heard something real. He crouched down. "Listen to me. If anyone comes near this house, they'll go through me first." She looked into his eyes, searching for certainty. For the first time, she found a sliver of it. "Would you trust Nathaniel if you were in Talia's position, or would you still be afraid?" As he tucked her back into bed, Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. This time, the message was more direct. "Tomorrow night. Be ready." Nathaniel stayed awake until dawn, working at his desk but unable to focus. The message replayed in his mind. Whoever these people were, they wanted her badly enough to risk showing themselves near his property. Why? What could a child like Talia possibly mean to them? Upstairs, Talia's eyes flew open when she heard voices drifting in from outside.
By the next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight gleamed over the Newport harbor, and gulls circled lazily in the sky. The estate grounds sparkled with dew, as if nothing had happened the night before. Nathaniel stood on the balcony outside his study, coffee in hand. For years, mornings like this had meant order, control, predictability. But today, he felt none of that. He felt watched. He checked the drive. The SUV from the night before hadn't returned, but the silence was heavier than the storm had been. It was the kind of quiet that warned him trouble wasn't gone, just waiting. Downstairs, Talia appeared in the doorway wearing one of his oversized shirts. She looked smaller than ever, sleeves dangling over her wrists. She said nothing, but the way she clutched her teddy bear told him she hadn't forgotten the whispers at the window. Nathaniel forced a calm tone. "Hungry?" She nodded. He led her to the kitchen, cracked eggs into a pan, and set out toast. Simple food. She ate slowly, carefully saving small pieces on the edge of her plate, the same way she had saved cookies the night before. Have you ever seen someone who saves food because they don't know when they'll eat again? Share your story below. The sound of engines rumbled at the gates. Not one vehicle this time, but 3. The estate's iron gates groaned as 3 black trucks lined up outside. Nathaniel's security team, usually calm and collected, shifted nervously. A group of men stepped out, heavy boots on asphalt, leather jackets, broad shoulders. They weren't here by accident. The leader, tall and scarred across his cheek, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted up the drive, "Cross, we know she's in there!" Nathaniel's blood chilled. How could they know her name or that she was here at all? He stepped outside, ignoring Margaret's pleas to stay inside. He walked down the steps with slow, deliberate confidence, stopping halfway down the drive. "What do you want?" His voice was steady, but his mind raced. The scarred man grinned. "The girl. Hand her over, and we walk away." Nathaniel didn't move. He could see Talia's face pressed to the upstairs window, pale and terrified. If you were Nathaniel, would you hand her over to keep the peace or fight to protect her? Tell me your answer. The scarred man raised his hand, and 2 more men stepped forward with a chain and padlock. One of the men rattled the gates, then snapped the chain around them. The padlock clicked. They weren't leaving anytime soon. "You've got 48 hours," the scarred man called out. "After that, she's gone. And you, your money, your house, none of it will matter." Nathaniel's fists clenched. He had faced rivals in boardrooms, competitors who played dirty. But this was different. These weren't businessmen. These were men who dealt in fear. "Why her?" Nathaniel demanded. The scarred man's grin widened. "She doesn't belong to you. She never did. She belongs to us." The words made Nathaniel's stomach twist. Beside him, his head of security whispered, "We should call the police." Nathaniel shook his head. He wasn't sure why, but his gut told him the law wouldn't stop these men. This was personal. Talia's voice echoed faintly from the upstairs window. "They won't stop. They never stop." What do you think? Are these men bluffing, or do they really have the power to take her away? Nathaniel took a step closer to the gates, locking eyes with the scarred man. The men behind the scarred leader shifted, impatient. One muttered, "We could take her now." The leader raised a hand. "Not yet. Let him think he's safe. Let him sweat." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had dealt with extortion before, but never like this. He stepped closer to the bars of the gate until he was only a few feet away. His voice was sharp enough to cut through the morning air. "If you touch her again, you'll regret it." The scarred man smirked. "We'll see." They climbed back into their trucks, engines roaring, and pulled away from the gates. The sound of tires on gravel echoed long after they were gone. Nathaniel stood frozen, fists still clenched. He wasn't just protecting a child anymore. He had just declared war. Inside, Talia stepped back from the window, her heart pounding.
She whispered to herself, "They'll be back." And deep down, Nathaniel knew she was right. This is just the beginning of the battle. If you want to see how Nathaniel and Talia face what's coming, subscribe to Goodness Corner now. Every chapter brings you closer.
By evening, the mansion no longer felt like Nathaniel's fortress. The confrontation at the gates still echoed in his mind, and though the men had left, their threat clung to the air. The sound of tires crunching on the drive broke his thoughts. Another car had arrived, sleek, silver, and familiar. Nathaniel's sister, Caroline Cross, stepped out. In her tailored coat and polished heels, she looked every inch the New York attorney who thrived on control. Her eyes swept the estate before landing on him. "You have lost your mind," she said without greeting. Nathaniel stiffened. "Good to see you too." She walked up the steps, her voice low but sharp. "Margaret called me. A homeless child? In your house? Do you understand the scandal this could cause?" Through the tall windows, Talia peeked from behind the curtain, her teddy clutched to her chest. Whose side are you on? Caroline's warning about scandal or Nathaniel's choice to protect Talia? Comment below. Caroline brushed past Nathaniel, heels clicking against the marble as she stormed inside. Caroline dropped her purse on the couch and turned on him. "Do you have any idea what the press would do if they find out? Billionaire takes in strange girl. They'll drag your name through every headline." Nathaniel crossed his arms. "She needed help." "She needs a shelter, not you," Caroline shot back. "You're not her guardian. You're not her savior. You're reckless." Her words cut sharper than he wanted to admit. For decades, Caroline had managed the family's legal affairs, shielding their reputation. To her, scandal was more dangerous than criminals at the gate. From the doorway, Talia's voice trembled. "I can go, if it's too much trouble." Both siblings turned. Caroline's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You see, even she knows she doesn't belong here." Nathaniel stepped forward. "She stays." Do you think Nathaniel is risking everything for the right reason? Or is Caroline right about the danger? Caroline's phone buzzed and her face drained as she read the screen. Caroline's hand trembled slightly as she held up the phone. The text was short, almost identical to the one he had received the night before. "She belongs to us. You have 48 hours. Talia flinched at the words, her fingers digging into her teddy. Caroline's voice dropped. "This isn't just about scandal. Whoever they are, they're watching you. Watching her. This is dangerous." For the first time, Nathaniel saw fear in his sister's eyes. She wasn't just worried about reputation anymore. She was worried about blood on the floor. He handed the phone back, his jaw set. "Then help me protect her, or get out of the way." Would you side with Nathaniel and take the risk, or side with Caroline and hand the child over for safety? Tell me in the comments. Caroline turned away, muttering, "If you keep this up, you won't only lose her, you'll lose everything." The argument stretched into the night. Caroline paced the living room, warning of ruined contracts, board members demanding answers, and the danger of lawsuits. Nathaniel listened, silent. His eyes kept drifting to Talia, who had curled up in the corner of the couch, her teddy clutched tightly, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. When Caroline finally stopped, Nathaniel spoke quietly. "Contracts can be rebuilt. Reputations fade. But if I let her go, what happens to her won't fade. It'll destroy her." Caroline stared at him, conflicted. For once, she had no quick rebuttal. At last, she sighed and grabbed her purse. "Do what you want, Nathaniel. But when this explodes, don't say I didn't warn you." She left without another word, the sound of her heels fading down the marble steps. Nathaniel sank into a chair, exhausted. Across the room, Talia whispered, "You didn't let her send me away?" "I told you. You're safe here." But deep down, both of them knew safety was a fragile word. This battle is far from over. If you want to see how Nathaniel balances family pressure with protecting Talia, subscribe to Goodness Corner now. Every twist brings you closer to the truth, and you won't want to miss what happens next.
The next morning, the mansion felt different. For the first time since Talia arrived, there wasn't thunder outside or raised voices inside. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, spilling warmth across the dining table. Nathaniel sat at one end, reading the paper out of habit, though his eyes rarely scanned the words. At the other end, Talia sat with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She ate slowly, cutting tiny bites, careful not to spill. It wasn't nervousness anymore. It was habit, the survival instinct of a child who had gone too long without enough. Nathaniel noticed. Without saying a word, he slid a second piece of toast onto her plate. She froze, eyes flicking up at him. He gave a faint nod, as if to say, "You don't have to save it for later." The corners of her mouth lifted in the smallest smile he'd seen from her. Would you have done the same as Nathaniel, or kept the boundary between yourself and the child? Talia pressed her face to the car window as they drove into downtown Newport. The harbor shimmered under the morning sun, yachts bobbing gently, tourists sipping coffee on sidewalk patios. For her, every storefront and every sound was new. Nathaniel pulled up outside a clothing shop. Inside, the racks overflowed with colors and textures. Talia hesitated at the doorway, overwhelmed. "Choose what you like," Nathaniel told her. She reached for the simplest items, plain jeans and a modest dress, holding them as though she didn't deserve more. When he suggested something brighter, she shook her head. "I don't want to cost too much." Nathaniel studied her, then spoke softly. "Talia, you deserve more than enough." The words hung between them, heavier than anything money could buy. "What's the most meaningful gift you've ever received? Not because it was expensive, but because it showed someone cared. Share it below." As they left the shop with bags in hand, Talia suddenly froze on the sidewalk. Across the street, a man leaned against the lamppost, watching. The man was tall, dressed in a dark jacket, pretending to scroll his phone, but his eyes never left them. Nathaniel noticed the way Talia clung to his sleeve, her face drained of color. "Is it him?" he asked quietly. She gave a tiny nod, her voice shaking. "One of them." Nathaniel guided her quickly toward the car. The man didn't move, but his smirk was enough to confirm the message. "We know where you are." Back inside the car, Talia pressed her teddy to her chest, her breathing shallow. Nathaniel gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. He had promised her safety, yet even in broad daylight, danger lingered like a shadow. What would you do if you realized someone was following you in public? Would you confront them or get away quietly? As Nathaniel started the engine, a folded note slid from beneath the windshield wiper. Nathaniel snatched the note and unfolded it. 5 words scrawled in heavy ink. 48 hours. Tick-tock. His knuckles whitened around the paper. He shoved it into his coat pocket before Talia could see the rest. She leaned close, her voice trembling. "They won't stop." Nathaniel didn't answer. His mind was already racing, calculating options, weighing risks. The streets of Newport, once familiar, now felt like a chessboard where every move was being watched. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The man across the street was gone. Nathaniel turned to Talia, forcing steadiness into his voice. "You're safe with me." But as he drove them back toward the mansion, the weight of the note pressed on his chest. Safety was slipping away faster than he could promise it. The walls are closing in. If you want to see what happens when the threats become action, subscribe to Goodness Corner now. Every chapter brings you closer to the truth, and you won't want to miss the next twist.
2 days passed since the warning note appeared on Nathaniel's windshield. Security around the mansion doubled. Guards patrolled the gates, cameras tracked every corner, and Nathaniel hardly left Talia's side. To calm her nerves, he agreed to let her accompany him to a scheduled doctor's visit, just a routine checkup arranged by a trusted family physician.
It's important, he told her. We need to make sure you're healthy. Talia sat in the waiting room, swinging her legs nervously. The bright white walls and the faint smell of disinfectant were a far cry from the streets she had come from. For once, she looked like a child again. Until she noticed a man in the corner pretending to read a magazine, his eyes flicking toward her too often. She leaned close to Nathaniel. He's watching me. Nathaniel glanced up. The man quickly looked away. He reassured her softly. Stay calm. We'll be out of here soon. Have you ever felt someone's eyes on you in public? Did you confront them or ignore it? Share your story. As Nathaniel stepped to the counter to sign paperwork, the doors to the clinic suddenly burst open. Two men rushed inside, faces hidden beneath baseball caps. Before anyone could react, one grabbed Talia by the arm, dragging her from her chair. She screamed, clutching her teddy as tightly as she could. Nathaniel! The room erupted in chaos. Patients gasped, staff shouted, and Nathaniel spun around, eyes blazing. Let her go! He lunged forward, but one of the men shoved him hard, knocking him against the counter. The second man stuffed a note into the receptionist's hand before yanking Talia toward the door. Her teddy slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor. She kicked and fought, but they lifted her like a rag doll. By the time Nathaniel regained his footing, the men had shoved her into a waiting van. Tires screeched against the pavement as the vehicle tore away, leaving only exhaust and screams behind. Nathaniel burst into the parking lot. Too late. The van was gone. What would you have done in Nathaniel's place? Chased the van yourself or called for backup? Nathaniel picked up the crumpled note left behind. The note was scrawled in bold ink, jagged and hurried. You have 24 hours. Bring $200,000 to the pier. Alone. No police. Nathaniel's grip tightened until the paper nearly tore. His security team urged him to call the authorities, but he shook his head. If we involve them, they'll vanish with her.
Back at the mansion, Nathaniel spread the ransom note across his desk. 24 hours. $200,000. The pier. Alone. The words seemed to pulse with every tick of the clock. He unlocked the safe hidden behind a wall panel. Stacks of cash were always kept on hand for emergencies, yet none of his past crises had felt like this. This wasn't about saving a deal or securing a contract. This was about saving a life. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face pale. "You're really going through with it?" "I don't have a choice," Nathaniel replied. "You do," she insisted. "Call the police, tell them everything." He shook his head. "If I do, she's gone before we get there." As he packed the money into a black duffel bag, his phone buzzed. Another message lit up the screen. "Don't test us. We see you." Nathaniel froze. Someone was watching, even inside his own home. What would you do? Trust the kidnapper's instructions or risk everything by calling the police? Comment below. Nathaniel turned slowly toward the security cameras mounted in the corners of the room. Reviewing the camera feeds, Nathaniel spotted a glitch. One camera overlooking the garden had gone black hours earlier. His chest tightened. Someone tampered with this. He ordered the guards to sweep the grounds immediately. Within minutes, they returned with a chilling discovery. The fence at the back of the estate had been cut clean through. Whoever had taken Talia had been planning this long before she arrived at his doorstep. Nathaniel's mind raced. These weren't opportunists. This was organized. Margaret pressed again. "Nathaniel, this isn't just about her. They're coming for you too. Look at the note. They used your name." Her words cut deep. Nathaniel realized the truth. This wasn't only about Talia's past. It was about his present, his fortune, and the enemies he'd made along the way. Do you think the kidnappers are after Talia, or is Nathaniel the real target? Tell me what you believe. His phone rang again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a video call. Nathaniel answered. The screen jolted, revealing a dimly lit warehouse. In the center sat Talia, tied to a chair, her teddy bear lying on the floor just out of reach. Her eyes were wide, but she tried to stay still, brave even through her trembling. A man's voice growled from off-screen. "The money, the pier, tomorrow night. Come alone, or you'll never see her again." Nathaniel's pulse thundered. "If you hurt her—" He cut before he could finish. He slammed the phone down, rage boiling under his calm exterior. He wanted to storm the city, tear apart every building until he found her. But the note was clear. One wrong move, and she'd vanish forever. He sat at his desk, fists clenched, forcing himself to think. Time was no longer on his side. If you saw someone you loved in that situation, would you pay the ransom without question, or try to outsmart the kidnappers? Nathaniel opened a hidden drawer in his desk, pulling out something he hadn't touched in years. Inside the drawer lay a small GPS tracker, once used for securing high-value contracts during international transfers. He clipped it to the zipper of the duffel bag. If the kidnappers wanted money, they'd get it. But Nathaniel wanted a trail. As the night wore on, he rehearsed every possible scenario. The pier was large, open, and easy to control. Too easy for them. He called his most trusted contact, a retired Navy officer turned private investigator, who owed him a favor. The man agreed to stay nearby, unseen, in case everything went wrong. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. He saw Talia's face in the warehouse, pale but defiant. He saw her whispering the words she'd said the night she entered his home. "I'll be quiet just until the storm passes." This was no storm. This was war. The countdown had begun. The clock is ticking. If you want to see how Nathaniel handles the ransom drop and whether Talia survives, subscribe to Goodness Corner right now. Every chapter brings you closer to the truth, and you won't want to miss the next twist.
The pier was silent, except for the groan of water slapping against the docks. Nathaniel stepped out of his car, the duffel bag slung across his shoulder. The air reeked of salt and oil, the kind of smell that clung to your skin. The warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted doors half open. Light flickered inside, uneven like a dying bulb. He tightened his grip on the bag and walked forward, each step echoing against the cracked pavement. Inside, shadows stretched across the walls, and in the center of the room, tied to a chair, was Talia. Her wrists were bound, her face pale, but her eyes, those wide, unblinking eyes, lit up the moment she saw him. "Nathaniel," she whispered, relief breaking her voice. A scarred man stepped out of the shadows, the same leader who had threatened him at the gates. Behind him, two others circled like vultures. "You brought the money?" the leader asked. Nathaniel tossed the duffel to the ground. 80,000 now, the rest when she's safe." The man laughed, the sound low and cruel. "Do you think this is a negotiation? She's ours until I say otherwise." "Would you have handed over all the money at once or kept some back like Nathaniel did?" The scarred man kicked the bag open, spilling bundles of cash across the floor. The bills scattered, but the kidnappers hardly looked at them. They circled Nathaniel instead, their smirks sharp. "You're not in charge here," the scarred man sneered. "Your money means nothing." Nathaniel stood tall, his voice steady. "She's a child. Let her go." One of the men leaned close to Talia, brushing her hair back with mock tenderness. "She's more than a child. She's leverage." Talia flinched but didn't cry out. She stared at the man, studying every detail of his face. Her small chest rose and fell, her breathing shallow but controlled. The leader turned to Nathaniel. "You've lived your life thinking power is about contracts and signatures. Out here, power is about fear. And she," he gestured at Talia, "is worth more than you realize." Nathaniel clenched his fists, rage boiling beneath his calm. He took a step forward, but one of the men shoved him back. "What would you do? Fight back even if it risked her life? Or wait for the right moment?" Before Nathaniel could respond, Talia's voice cut through the warehouse, clear and sharp. "You can't sell me," she said, suddenly, her voice trembling but steady enough to silence the room. The kidnappers froze, then laughed. "What did you say?" Talia's eyes locked on the scarred leader. "Because I know who you are. Mark Riley. You live on Blossom Lane. You have a daughter at St. Joseph's School." The man's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowed, fury flashing. "How do you—" She turned to the second man. "And you, Jason Miller, your mother is in the hospital in Providence. Do you want her to know what you really do?" The third man stiffened, his grin fading. Even Nathaniel stared at her, stunned. How could she possibly know? Talia's voice grew stronger, sharper. "I remember things. You talked when you thought I wasn't listening. You think I'm just some kid, but I know your names. I know where you live. I know who you care about." The silence was heavy, the power in the room shifting. The kidnappers, once confident, now looked unsettled. "Did you expect Talia to turn the tables like this? Tell me your reaction." Distant sirens wailed, faint, but growing louder. The scarred leader hissed, "She's bluffing," but his voice cracked just enough to betray doubt. The sound of sirens crept closer, their wail echoing through the night air. Nathaniel realized Clara Rossi, the social worker, must have gone against his orders and called the authorities. He didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. The kidnappers exchanged frantic glances. "We need to move now," one barked. The scarred man cursed, then pulled a knife, slashing the ropes binding Talia. "Go, but this isn't over." They bolted for the rear exit just as the sirens blared outside. Nathaniel rushed forward, gathering Talia into his arms. She clung to him, trembling, her voice breaking. "You knew you'd come." He held her tight, his throat tight with emotion. "No one will ever take you from me again." Police stormed the warehouse, but the men had already vanished into the night. All that remained was the echo of their threats, and the knowledge that Talia had faced them down with nothing but her mind. Nathaniel looked at her, pride and fear mingling in his chest. She wasn't just a child in need of saving. She was someone who had saved herself, and him too. What did you think of Talia's bravery? If this moment shocked you, make sure you subscribe to Goodness Corner right now.
Every chapter brings more courage, more twists, and more heart. Don't miss what's next.
The warehouse was behind them, but its echoes followed Nathaniel like shadows. He drove through the dark streets of Newport, one hand tight on the wheel, the other steadying the blanket-wrapped child beside him. Talia leaned against the seat, her eyes heavy but restless. Every bump in the road made her flinch, as though she expected another set of hands to grab her. She hadn't let go of his sleeve since he pulled her from the chair. Nathaniel glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked smaller than ever, fragile yet unbroken. The weight of what she had done, the way she had turned fear into a weapon against her captors, stirred both pride and unease in him. As the headlights cut across the mansion gates, Nathaniel's chest tightened. He wondered if bringing her here had saved her, or placed her in the line of fire. Do you think Nathaniel should keep fighting for Talia on his own, or hand her over to authorities for safety? Inside the mansion, someone unexpected was waiting. The front doors opened to reveal Caroline Cross, arms folded, face pale but stern. She had flown back without warning, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I saw the reports. Masked men, sirens by the pier, and you at the center of it. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. She's safe now. Caroline's gaze shifted to Talia, who shrank behind him. Safe? Look at her. She's a child caught in a war she doesn't understand. And you? You're dragging her deeper. Talia's small voice broke the tension. He saved me. For a moment, silence filled the room. Caroline's eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. Maybe tonight. But what about tomorrow? Nathaniel had no answer. The truth gnawed at him. Caroline wasn't wrong. If you were Caroline, would you fight to remove Talia? Caroline pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. Inside the folder were legal documents, preliminary petitions filed by Child Services. Caroline's voice was cold, professional. They're already asking questions. They want to know why a billionaire is harboring a runaway. They want proof you can protect her. Nathaniel scanned the papers. Custody hearings, welfare checks, formal investigations. His throat tightened. He had spent his life mastering contracts, but these words felt heavier than any deal he'd ever signed. Talia looked between them, confusion clouding her tired eyes. Are they going to take me away? Nathaniel crouched to meet her gaze. Not if I can help it. Caroline shook her head. Your will isn't enough. You'll need evidence, testimonies, stability. And after tonight, all you have is chaos. Nathaniel closed the folder, his voice low but firm. Then I'll fight with everything I have. Do you think the system will protect Talia, or will it fail her the way it failed before? Share your thoughts.
The following morning, the mansion was unusually still. Nathaniel hadn't slept, his mind stuck on Caroline's warning and the papers she'd left behind. A sharp knock at the front door shattered the silence. Margaret opened it cautiously, revealing a woman in a gray blazer holding a folder. Her voice was calm but authoritative. "Mr. Cross? Clara Rossi, Rhode Island Child Protective Services." Nathaniel stepped forward. He recognized the name from the paperwork. Clara's expression was neutral, but her eyes softened when they flicked toward Talia, who stood in the hallway clutching her teddy. "We've received reports," Clara said. "I need to ask some questions about where she came from, how she arrived here, and what your intentions are." Talia shrank behind Nathaniel, her voice small. "Please don't send me back." Nathaniel rested a hand on her shoulder. "No one is sending you anywhere today." Clara scribbled a note, but said nothing. "Do you believe child services usually protect kids in situations like this, or do they make things worse? Share your thoughts." Clara opened her folder, pulling out a court summons. The paper bore the official seal of the Rhode Island Family Court. Clara's tone remained professional as she explained, "A temporary custody hearing has been scheduled. You'll need to appear in Providence in 3 days." Nathaniel scanned the document, his jaw tightening. He had faced senators, CEOs, even foreign ministers, but this felt heavier. This wasn't about reputation. This was about Talia's future. Caroline appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "I told you this was coming. Now it's official." Talia's face went pale. "What if they don't let me stay?" Nathaniel crouched down, eye level with her. "Then I'll fight harder." Clara watched the exchange silently. She wasn't unkind, but her job required distance. She added, "The judge will want evidence, proof you can provide stability, safety, and emotional care. Think carefully about what you want to present." Nathaniel nodded stiffly. "I'll be there." If you were the judge, would you prioritize the child's need for safety with Nathaniel or the risks of keeping her in his world? That night, Nathaniel sat in his study, staring at the empty witness stand drawn in his mind. Who would speak for him and for her? Over the next 2 days, the mansion transformed into a war room. Legal advisors arrived, shuffling through stacks of papers. Caroline brought her own team, though her loyalties seemed torn between protecting her brother and salvaging the Cross family name. Margaret, usually composed, surprised everyone by stepping forward. "If the court wants proof she's safe here, I'll testify. I've seen how he protects her. I've seen how she changes him." Talia listened quietly, perched on the edge of the couch. At one point, she whispered, "Do I have to talk too?" Nathaniel's gaze softened. "Only if you want to. But your voice may matter more than anyone's." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. The night before the hearing, Nathaniel walked the halls of the mansion alone. For the first time, the place felt less like a fortress and more like a home, and he realized he wasn't ready to let anyone take that away. Do you think Talia should speak in court, or is it too much pressure for a child her age? Morning light spilled across Providence as they entered the courthouse. The courtroom was solemn, lined with wood panels and heavy benches. Reporters lingered outside, hungry for a scandal, but inside only the law mattered. Judge Harold Price, a stern man with years etched into his face, presided. He adjusted his glasses and began. "Mr. Cross, this hearing will determine whether temporary custody of the child remains with you or is transferred to the state. Present your case." Caroline rose first, outlining the risks. She acknowledged Nathaniel's wealth and resources, but emphasized the chaos, the kidnappings, the threats. "This is not a safe environment," she concluded. Nathaniel's attorney countered with testimony from Margaret, who spoke with rare emotion about how Talia had begun to heal under his roof. Finally, all eyes turned to Talia. The judge asked gently, "Do you wish to say anything?" She gripped her teddy and whispered,
I want to stay with him. He makes me feel safe." The room fell silent. Do you think the judge will side with Nathaniel or with the system? Subscribe to Goodness Corner now so you don't miss the next chapter of this story, the decision that could change everything.
The courthouse in Providence buzzed with quiet tension. Reporters huddled outside, cameras flashing, but inside the chamber, silence pressed against the walls. Nathaniel sat at the long oak table, his attorney beside him. Talia sat close, her teddy tucked against her lap, her small legs swinging nervously above the floor. Across the aisle, representatives from Child Protective Services whispered among themselves, their folders stacked high with notes. Judge Harold Price entered, his black robe flowing, his expression unreadable. He struck the gavel once. This hearing continues. Today we will determine whether custody is formally granted or withdrawn. The room seemed to hold its breath. Nathaniel glanced at Talia. She gripped his sleeve so tightly he felt her trembling through the fabric. He placed his hand over hers, steadying her without words. If you were in that courtroom, would you believe Talia was safest with Nathaniel or safer in state custody? Tell me your thoughts below. The first witness was called. Margaret was sworn in. Her voice shook at first, but she grew steadier as she described what she'd seen in the mansion since Talia's arrival. She came to us afraid, hiding food in her pockets, Margaret said. Now she laughs, she smiles, she sleeps without fear. Mr. Cross didn't just give her a roof, he gave her peace. The opposing attorney pressed. And yet criminals have targeted the estate repeatedly. Would you call that safe? Margaret didn't flinch. No child is ever truly safe in this world, but she is safest with him. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Nathaniel felt a surge of gratitude for the woman who had worked beside him for decades, now standing firmly on his side. Then the judge turned to Talia. Young lady, you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but if you wish, your voice will be heard. The courtroom quieted to pin-drop silence. Would you let a child speak in such a heavy moment, or protect her from the pressure? Talia rose slowly, teddy in hand. She stood on shaky legs, her voice soft but clear. When I came here, I asked if I could sleep in a doghouse. But he opened the big door instead. Gasps rippled across the room. She clutched the teddy tighter. I've been hungry before, cold before. People looked at me like I wasn't even real. But he looks at me like I matter. He makes me feel safe, like I finally have a home, like I finally have a dad. The last word broke her voice. Nathaniel's throat burned as he reached for her hand. For a moment, even the judge's stern expression softened. The opposing attorney tried to recover, but their questions fell flat against the weight of her testimony. What part of Talia's words touched you most? Share your reaction in the comments. The judge leaned forward, preparing to deliver his decision. Judge Price tapped the gavel once, his tone firm. After careful review of testimony, evidence, and the best interests of the child, this court rules in favor of Mr. Nathaniel Cross. Full custody and adoption are hereby granted. The words seemed to echo forever. Talia gasped, turning to Nathaniel with wide eyes. Did you hear that? I get to stay? Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. Not just stay. You're my daughter now. She buried her face against his chest, tears dampening his suit. Thank you, Dad. The words struck him harder than any boardroom victory, heavier than any fortune he'd earned. In that moment, Nathaniel realized this was the only deal that had ever truly mattered. Caroline, watching from the gallery, wiped a tear she tried to hide.
Even Clara Rossi, bound by duty, gave the faintest nod of approval. Outside, the reporters swarmed, but Nathaniel walked past them with Talia's hand in his. For once, headlines didn't matter. What mattered was the child at his side, the one who had turned his mansion into a home. If this chapter moved you, subscribe to Goodness Corner right now. Every story we share proves that compassion can change lives, and you don't want to miss the next part of Nathaniel and Talia's journey.
The Cross estate no longer felt like the cold monument it once was. Weeks after the adoption ruling, the marble floors were covered with the evidence of a child's presence. Sneakers by the door, crayons scattered across the kitchen counter, and a soccer ball resting in the garden. Nathaniel returned from his office one afternoon to find Talia in the living room, sprawled on the floor, coloring. She looked up at him and grinned, holding up her drawing of the mansion with a bright yellow sun overhead. See, it looks happier now. For years, he had seen the estate as a fortress of stone and steel, but in her picture, it looked like a home. And maybe for the first time, that's what it truly was. Margaret, passing through with laundry, paused to smile. "She's brought life into this place, Mr. Cross." Nathaniel corrected her gently. "It's our place now." Have you ever seen a home change completely once a child entered it? Tell me your story below. Talia tugged his sleeve that evening. "Can we go somewhere together? Just us?" On Saturday, Nathaniel kept his promise. He drove Talia into Providence, away from lawyers and reporters, just a father and daughter for the day. They ate ice cream on the sidewalk, the melting drips staining their hands. Talia laughed for the first time without hesitation, pointing out shop windows and street performers. At a bookstore, she lingered in the children's aisle, her eyes wide at the shelves stacked with stories. Nathaniel bought her 3 books, though she'd only asked for 1. She hugged them tightly as though they were treasures. On the ride back, she rested her head against the window and whispered, "This is what family feels like, right?" Nathaniel swallowed hard, his voice steady but warm. "Yes, this is family." What's one small thing that made you feel like you truly belonged somewhere? That night, Nathaniel stayed awake, staring at his study wall. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about business, he was thinking about legacy. The following week, Nathaniel called a meeting not with investors, but with community leaders. Around the long dining table sat teachers, social workers, and local officials. Carolyn, curious, peeked through the doorway as he addressed them. "I've spent years building towers of glass and steel, but it took a child to show me what really matters. Too many kids are still out there tonight without a safe place to go. That has to change." His plan was simple but bold. To create Talia's Haven, a network of shelters across the state offering warmth, education, and dignity to children who had been forgotten. Carolyn, who had once fought him at every step, now sat beside him nodding slowly. "If you're serious about this, I'll help. No contracts, no scandals, just the work." Talia beamed from the doorway, whispering to her teddy, "We're helping them, aren't we?" Do you believe one person with resources can make a difference, or does real change always require a community? Weeks later, at the ribbon cutting of the first shelter in Providence, Talia stood by Nathaniel's side. The day of the opening, the courtyard buzzed with families, volunteers, and local press. The building behind them bore a simple sign, Talia's Haven. Nathaniel cut the ribbon, but it was Talia who stole the moment. Standing on tiptoe at the microphone, she said softly, "This place is for kids like I used to be, kids who just need someone to open a door for them." Applause filled the air. Nathaniel's chest swelled with pride, but also humility. For all his wealth, it was her courage that had lit the path. Later that evening, back at the estate, Talia ran through the garden, her laughter echoing off the walls. Nathaniel watched from the patio, knowing the mansion was no longer a hollow symbol of power. It was a place where hope lived. And yet, as night settled, he felt a quiet awareness. The past wasn't finished with them. The shadows that once circled might one day return. But for now, they had light, and that was enough. If this chapter touched your heart, subscribe to Goodness Corner right now.
Stories like this remind us that kindness can reshape lives, and you won't want to miss the final chapter of Nathaniel and Talia's journey.
The mansion gardens glowed softly in the fading light of evening. Roses bent under the weight of summer bloom, and the fountain's steady trickle broke the silence. Nathaniel walked slowly down the path, his hands tucked into his pockets, watching as Talia darted ahead. She wore the pale blue dress she loved most, her hair catching the sunset. She stopped suddenly in front of a small wooden structure nestled by the hedges. It wasn't there months ago. Built with clean boards, painted white, and decorated with flowers planted in a circle, it stood proudly at the edge of the lawn. Talia turned, smiling. "Do you remember the first thing I asked you?" Nathaniel's chest tightened. "Yes, you asked if you could sleep in my doghouse." She nodded. "Well, now we have one. But it's not just for me." On the front, a small plaque gleamed in the last rays of the sun. The words carved into it read, "For every child still searching for a home, and for those who have found one." What do you think of this plaque? Would you add different words if it were yours? Nathaniel crouched beside her, reading the inscription aloud as she reached for his hand.